Hello, welcome to another study session with Shane Church. Today we're going over the Federal Aviation Regulation for Special Airworthiness Certificate Eligibility in the Light Sport category. 14 CFR 21190. Let's look at the actual regulation here. So this is it. It's a big guy, 21190. And there are four parts to it. A is talking about the purpose of this regulation. B is talking about how to be eligible to get a special airworthiness certificate. C is talking about what's called the manufacturer's statement of compliance, which it goes into good detail about what it wants from that. D is light sport aircraft manufactured outside the United States. So foreign aircraft for light sport. And that is it. Those are the four sections for that. Let's dive into it. Okay, so this is the first little part of it, the purpose. So the FAA, let's read it. The FAA issues a special airworthiness certificate in a light sport category to operate a light sport aircraft other than a gyroplane. So what this means is that Part 21.190 exists to explain the special airworthiness certificate for light sport aircraft, except for gyroplanes. Now, I didn't know what gyroplanes are, and so I did a quick Google search, and this is apparently a gyroplane. And some cool facts about a gyroplane, just before we move on, is this is essentially a plane. It's not a helicopter that replaced the wings with a main rotor. And so the cool thing is that main rotor is not powered. There's no power plant. There's no engine making that thing spin. The engine is behind that propeller on the back there that you see. And what happens is, as it accelerates, the main rotor catches the air and generates lift. And it spins just freely. And that's what creates the lift. And as you can see, there's control surfaces behind the cockpit there instead of on the wing surfaces. So that is a gyroplane. And just remember that these are not included in the Special Airworthiness Certificate for the light sport category. Okay, let's move on. So, what does it take to qualify for a Special Airworthiness Certificate light sport category? Let's read it. An applicant must provide the FAA with the aircraft's operating instructions, the aircraft's maintenance and inspection procedures, the manufacturer's statement of compliance, as described in paragraph C of this section, and the aircraft flight training supplement. Okay, what are these things and what does this mean? So essentially what this means is that you have to give the FAA these 5 things. I think it's 5. The operating instructions is essentially the pilot's operating handbook or the aircraft flight manual, airplane flight manual. That type of thing is what the operating instructions are. The maintenance and inspection procedures, they're going to be contained in the maintenance manual and the type certificate data sheet. The next thing is the manufacturer's statement of compliance, which is what it sounds like. It's a statement from the manufacturer that says they're going to do what the FAA wants. And then the flight training supplement, which is a flight training manual, which I have heard is a supplement to the pilot's operating handbook in a lot of cases. Let's move on. I didn't know exactly what a type certificate data sheet was, so I just decided to put these 4 things here. I'm excluding the statement of manufacturer's compliance here. But I have these 4 things, and if you haven't seen them before, that's a pilot's operating handbook for a Cessna. That's what a maintenance log might look like. It's just a big binder, details everything that's ever been done to the aircraft. That's a type certificate data sheet, which is 3rd there, TCDS. And you can find this for your aircraft on the FAA website. And this is a flight training manual, which, as I said, is probably a supplement to the pilot's operating handbook. So let's go into a little bit more detail about the type certificate data sheet, just because that's what I wanted to learn about. So this is the first page of a type certificate data sheet. This thing is essentially the birth certificate of an aircraft. It contains key technical info like the airframe specifications, the propeller model, the engine, the dimensions of the aircraft and the things in it, the operating limitations. This is essentially the official reference for anybody that is dealing with this aircraft. And like a lot of other things, you can find it on the FAA website. You have to have some information about your aircraft to do it, though, because I tried and I didn't know all the stuff, so I couldn't find one. This is just a generic image that I found on Google. This isn't specifically the aircraft I train in. Okay, so this is part 2 of what it takes to qualify. Let's read it. The aircraft must not have been previously issued a standard, primary, restricted, limited, or provisional airworthiness certificate, or an equivalent airworthiness certificate issued by a foreign civil aviation authority. What does this mean? That's a lot of different types of airworthiness certificates, so for the purpose of studying for the private pilot written exam, I'm just going to say that it can't have had another airworthiness certificate. If you want to make flashcards for all of those types, you can, but it just makes more sense to remember this as saying that the aircraft can't already have received another airworthiness certificate in the past. So that's part 2 of eligibility. Let's look at this. Make me a little bigger here. Part 3 of eligibility. The aircraft must be inspected by the FAA and found to be in a condition for safe operation. This means that the aircraft has to be checked out by the FAA and they have to agree that it is safe to fly. Pretty simple. This is part C, talking about the manufacturer's statement of compliance. So this is, well, let me read it. So manufacturer's statement of compliance for light sport category aircraft. The manufacturer's statement of compliance required in paragraph B1III of this section must. So essentially, what this is saying is that they're going to tell us what a manufacturer's statement of compliance has to do. This is just the intro for the manufacturer's statement of compliance. Okay. Okay. So this is part 1 of the manufacturer's statement of compliance, what it has to do. Identify the aircraft by make and model, serial number, class, date of manufacture, and consensus standard used. So simply, it has to show the aircraft's identifying info. And these are 5 things. It has to have the make and model, the serial number, the class, the date of manufacture, and the consensus standard that was used. Just in case, I have them written here, in case you don't know what those things are. The make would be a Cessna, if it's a Cessna, a Piper. The model is a 172 or a 172 Skyhawk. So make model Cessna 172 Skyhawk. Serial number, that's kind of like the VIN number, I imagine. And it looks like the first 4 placeholders of that serial number is the make and model. 172 Skyhawk, 172 Sierra. See that? Class, this is for aircraft, not for pilots. So the class is talking about, things like single engine land, multi-engine land, things like that. And in this case, it's a single engine land because it has one propeller and it lands on the land. It can't land in water. And the date of manufacture is the date that it was finished, date that it was made. And the consensus standard, that's for Cessna, it's usually found in the type certificate data sheet, but you can find the consensus standard used on the FAA website if you'd like some reading material to put you to sleep. Okay, this is part 2 of the manufacturer's statement of compliance. It has to state that the aircraft meets the provisions of the identified consensus standard. So, it needs to say that everything complies with the consensus standard. It is a statement of compliance, after all. Okay. Part 3. state that the aircraft conforms to the manufacturer's design data using the manufacturer's quality assurance system that meets the identified consensus standard. It needs to say that the aircraft is what the manufacturer says that it is. It's got to be what they say it is. And you can see it's got a quality assurance system. That's something that you use in manufacturing to make sure that it fits within the specifications that they deem okay for a product. And that's what they're saying. That it meets those specifications and it is what they say it is. Part 4. The manufacturer's statement of compliance has to state that the manufacturer will make available to any interested person the following documents that meet the identified consensus standard: the aircraft's operating instructions, the aircraft's maintenance and inspection procedures, the aircraft's flight training supplement. Okay, so essentially, it needs to say that the manufacturer will show anyone the POH, the maintenance log, and the flight training manual. They will show anyone these things. That's what it's saying. Anyone that's interested, a 4-year-old kid, an adult, your mother. They have to show anyone who is interested these 3 documents. Okay, Part 5. The manufacturer statement of compliance must state that the manufacturer will monitor and correct safety of flight issues through the issuance of safety directives and continued airworthiness system, and a continued airworthiness system that meets the identified consensus standard. It needs to say that the manufacturer will keep tabs on the aircraft and tell everybody what to do if something bad is discovered. Very, very nice, right? They want to make sure that the manufacturers are paying attention to what's going on with the airplanes that they sell, and the helicopters and the aircraft and whatnot. And if something bad is discovered, they have to issue a safety directive that explains what to do about the problems that they discover. Like if it's found that the bolts that hold on the wing, the starboard wing, are too thin and they're likely to break, they might issue a safety directive saying that you got to change those bolts to be thicker or something like that. That would be a pretty big one, though. That'd be pretty bad. Okay, Part 6. Manufacturer statement of compliance has to state that at the request of the FAA, the manufacturer will provide unrestricted access to its facilities. So it needs to say that the manufacturer will let the FAA check out their factory anytime without any locked doors. They're giving open access to the FAA. They can come in, they can go in the office, they can go in the back room, they can lay underneath the fucking, excuse my language, they can lay underneath, you get the point, the conveyor belts. They can go anywhere they want, the FAA, into the manufacturer's facilities. Part 7 for the manufacturer statement of compliance. Manufacturer's statement of compliance must state that the manufacturer, in accordance with a production acceptance test procedure that meets an applicable consensus standard, has ground and flight tested the aircraft, found the aircraft performance acceptable, and determined that the aircraft is in a condition for safe operation. It needs to say that the manufacturer has tested that the aircraft works and is safe to fly. They tested it. They made sure that it worked. It's safe. That's what they need to do. And prove that they did that by saying it on the manufacturer's statement of compliance. Okay. I think this is the last part here. Foreign Light Sport Aircraft Part D of 21190. For aircraft manufactured outside of the United States to be eligible for a special airworthiness certificate in the light sport category, an applicant must meet the requirements of paragraph B of this section and provide to the FAA evidence that. Okay, what this means. It needs to have all the eligibility requirements mentioned in B. All that eligibility stuff, it has to have it all if it's a foreign aircraft. That's light sport, in order to be considered for a special airworthiness certificate. And then there's more. I think this is part 1. Yeah. So, foreign aircraft, part 1, what they have to prove. The aircraft was manufactured in a country with which the United States has a bilateral airworthiness agreement concerning airplanes or bilateral aviation safety agreement with associated implementation procedures for airworthiness concerning airplanes or an equivalent airworthiness agreement. Oh, that's a lot of words, guys. But you know what it's broken down to? It just means that the foreign airplane has to come from a country that agrees with the FAA, has to come from a place that has the same types of standards and things that we in the US with the FAA have created. So like Britain or some European countries, countries that are on the same dime, things like that. Ugh, I'm tired. They just have to. It has to come from a country that agrees. Okay, what foreign aircraft have to prove? Part 2. The aircraft is eligible for an airworthiness certificate, flight authorization, or other similar certification in its country of manufacture. So essentially, the airplane has to be able to be certified in its own country in order for us here in the US to consider certifying it. Okay, what's next here? Okay, perfect. These are the basics. I broke it down as simple as I could, this giant freaking thing. Here we are. There are 3 main parts to it. The first part is talking about what the eligibility requirements for this. Let me just read it, okay? The first part explains special airworthiness certificate eligibility for light sport aircraft. So it explains the eligibility for light sport aircraft to get a special airworthiness certificate. And that eligibility consists of 3 basic things. You have to give the FAA the pilot's operating handbook, the maintenance manual, the type certificate data sheet, and the flight training manual. The second, it can't already have an airworthiness certificate. And the last, must work and be safe. So to be eligible for a special airworthiness certificate in the light sport aircraft category, you got to give them those documents. You can't have an airworthiness certificate already, and your airplane has to work and be safe. Number 2, the second part of 21190. Gotta have a manufacturer's statement of compliance. And that statement of compliance has to do this whole list of things. It has to have the identification information. It has to agree with the consensus standard. It has to say that it is what it says that it is. It has to say that it is what it says that it is. It has to say that the manufacturer will show documents to anyone. It has to say that the manufacturer will keep tabs on safety and communicate problems. It has to say that the manufacturer will give open access to the FAA. And it has to show that the aircraft has been tested. That's number 2 for the manufacturer statement of compliance. Has the identifying information, agrees with the consensus standard, is what it says it is. Manufacturer will show the documents to anybody. Manufacturer will keep tabs on safety and communicate problems. Manufacturer will give open access to the FAA. And the manufacturer will show on this statement that the aircraft has been tested. That's part 2. And part 3 is about foreign light sport aircraft. Foreign light sport aircraft have to first of all meet the eligibility requirements that are explained in section 1. POH, maintenance manual, TCDS, FTM, flight training manual. Not have an airworthiness certificate, must work and be safe. All those requirements in the first part, foreign aircraft in the light sport category have to meet those eligibility requirements. And second, the foreign aircraft has to come from a place that agrees with the Federal Aviation Administration. They have to have a bilateral agreement with us, that we both agree on, their country and our country, and we agree on the same stuff. And that's where that airplane came from. And that's it. That is 21190. 14 CFR 21.190. I hope you learned something. I hope this helped you study your federal aviation regulations. I'll be honest with you, this is really boring. I don't know why I'm putting myself through this, but I need to study it for my pilot exam. So do you. Hopefully this helped. Hopefully we can get out of the books and get into the air. Have a good time, guys.